Get going because we've got a double bill going on tonight. So how about that for the price of the admission? Haha, you get double billing. So I don't know how much you guys know about proportional representation. I don't know how much you know about, I know how much you know about first past the post. But quite frankly, we're all going to be asked to vote on this. And it goes to November, I think. I believe you're also going to receive some stuff in the mail. Anyway, these folks will fill you in on that. So I happened to see Ellen, and they'll introduce her later, at homecoming out here. And I think everybody can hear me.
There's a bit of a static.
Yeah, it's always echoey. It's the worst sound. The other day at the memorial, they had to quit using the mic. So, sorry.
That's better, yeah.
Okay, so we'll try again. Anyway, I was talking to Ellen outside, and I said, you know, I don't understand this. Would you be willing to do something at the hall? To her credit, she said yes. So with us tonight, we have Anne Remnant. And Anne is currently the Fair Vote Canada Kootenai leader, although non-political by nature. Fairness has always been important to Anne. It was the disparity between the popular vote and the election results that first alerted her to a systematic problem and to proportional representation as a no-brainer. That was a dozen years ago. Since then, she has done whatever she can to keep the PR in public eye. She has been waiting impatiently for the next best opportunity, and that opportunity is now. And with her is Shane Derks. And Shane, originally from Holland, is a lifelong political junkie. Shame on you. Who has worked every available election job in BC, from organizing the provincial and federal elections as the deputy returning officer. Oh, that was good. Officer to taking votes at the voting booth, to sweeping floors after the election is over. He also ran as Green Party candidate in 2013 provincial election, but currently has no political party affiliation. And in preparation for the 2018 referendum, is 100% dedicated to proportional representation. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for these two great people.
Thank you very much, Grace. And thank you to Ellen and Linda for being local leaders in this area. So we have a short presentation for you, about half an hour, and then we'll boom through that. So if you could hold your questions until the end.
Can you guys see that?
Not very well.
No.
Not very
So
well.
there's one light you should be able to put off with putting it all off.
And everyone can hear me? Okay, great.
Grace, turn the pot lights off.
Oh,
They
yes,
cause static.
spotlights.
The other one.
Well,
I don't mind if it's dark.
Good, good, got it.
Static on, okay.
Yeah.
Then we can turn it up a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, pot lights don't go off.
They're
They're
on.
on. Okay, all lights are on.
They
Are
were
we good
causing
yet?
static, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
if we're good, we're good.
Can we
Up with playing.
get some of these lights out, or maybe somebody put, I can turn the whole lights.
Someone turn them off at the back.
There, that was better.
There.
Okay.
Oh, that's nice and dark. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, not too scary? Okay. So who are we? We're Fair Vote Canada volunteers. Fair Vote Canada is a national organization, not for nonprofit, advocating for proportional representation at all levels of government. Currently in BC, we have about 25 to 30 chapters around the province, like Grand Forks, Christina Lake. And they have a total of one full-time paid person and a part-time bookkeeper who I understand is actually volunteer. So we are totally grassroots, and you'll probably recognize yourself in holding a placard.
It's not about the money.
So we're going to start with a couple of questions for you. Who thinks, hands up, who thinks living in a democracy is a good thing? Most of us. Who thinks our democracies are functioning well? A couple of people.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a gap there.
All right. Which is why we're here.
So, this evening we will be talking about first past the post, our current system and some of the problems, why we think it should be changed, about proportional representation and some of the advantages it can bring to us. We'll talk about the BC referendum that's coming up between October 22nd and November 30th, how you can get involved, and then we'll get to your questions.
Yeah.
Okay, democracy, that's really what it's about. It started all about 2,800 years ago in the city of Athens, where the men gathered around the main square, the agora, and decided to not have some king make all the decisions, but they themselves. That's where the word comes from as well. Demos, the people, kratos, to rule. Democracy, the people rule. Not political parties, not corporations, the people, you and I.
So the system we use right now is called first past the post or single member plurality. It's a system we use in Canada at every level of government, both provincial and federal. We know it well. We think we understand it completely. It is called a winner-take-all system because the winner gets everything. We elect one person in each riding. It's easy to explain. The vote count is the one that got the most votes in that riding. It works okay when there's two parties, but it does have some problems.
And here's the heart of the problem, and it's very close to my heart because it's about beer. I like beer. And here we have 3 people who want to go for a beer at the Red Lion, 2 people want to go for a beer at the Castle, 2 people want to go for a beer at the Queen's Head. By vast majority of people want to go for a beer, but it's a plurality system. The majority doesn't count. So it's those 4 coffee shop people, those wimps, who want to go to the coffee shop, they win it. Everybody goes to the coffee shop, even though more people want to actually go for a beer. That translates into how we in our elections as well. This is boundaries to milk and bean election. On the left-hand side, this is how we voted here. Liberal 43%, NDP 33%, Green 10%, Independent 14%. On the right-hand side here, this is how we're represented. All those green, yellow, and red voters might as well have stayed home for the difference their vote made. It didn't count for anything. And that's how we get these false majority governments. What's a false majority government is if less than half of us voted for a political party, yet that political party gets all the power. False majority. Don't. Fewer than us voted for them than they've then voted for anybody else, but they still get all the power. And it's normal. It's completely normal. All these systems on this side, all false majorities. We had a real majority in 2001, but that's when the party that got 57% of the vote got 97% of the seats. You may remember that. There's 2 lone NDP members in the legislature. And of course, right now, a very exceptional situation, or so it seems, a minority government. And it doesn't just affect Green Party voters, as you can see. Liberal voters, almost 800,000 voted for Liberal, but 320,000 votes were wasted. 313,000 NDP votes were wasted, and 290,000 Green votes were wasted. Why are we looking at those Green votes often? Because that was 88%. In other words, for every 10 people who voted Green, 1 vote actually helped to elect a candidate.
This map was drawn. The map on the left was actually hand-drawn by the Faribault Kamloops group, and it shows exactly how we voted in 2017. Now, it's a bit hard to see where the ridings are, but if you look on the right, that is actually one riding. That's a big Stikine or whatever it's called. That's one big riding up there. You can see Liberals, NDP, and Grey as independents all voted there, but it's all orange. And that diversity that we see there is in Vancouver, it's in southern tip of Vancouver Island, and it's all across the province. So all across the province there are people who are voting Green, NDP, Conservative, and Liberal, and not having their votes count. Strategic voting, who's done that? I mean, I think a lot of people have. In fact, the Broadband Institute said that they did an exit poll after the 2015 federal election, and they said 46% of people did not vote for their first choice. So we're trying to make the system work, and we're not very successful. Neither do we get the results we want, nor do we vote what we really want to. Policy lurch is a really big problem. I mean, all of us don't like to waste money. I think that's pretty easy to sign off on. And yet, when we have one government do something and then we get rid of them and another government comes in and dismantles everything that was there, that's called policy lurch. You swing from one ideology to the other, and it costs a lot of money. So up there, this is federal, but scientists, Harper fired the scientists, Trudeau rehired them. Expensive. Eliminated the long form census and reinstated it. It doesn't really get us anywhere further, it's just back and forth, back and forth. Set up carbon trading, invest in clean energy, and then the next government eliminated it. Introduced buck of beer. Yay, buck of beer. Hyper-partisan polarized politics. I don't know what you guys think. I find it more than annoying. I find it really obnoxious that they just yell at each other. Oh, I hope we don't go to the family slides already.
No.
Yeah. So policy lurch is very, very expensive. When you look at the wildfires that we all suffered from this year, I read an article in The Sun, and it said that George Abbott, who was the minister responsible, he admitted it was short-term thinking, that they have not dealt properly with the fires, with getting rid of the fuel in the forests, and so we end up with loss of homes and huge cost, huge emotional cost, and it could have been avoided, or at least it could have been minimized.
Okay, I don't think I'll be able to play videos, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
They seem to have sound.
Okay. Yeah. So okay, that's too bad. It's a little short video clip. Corky Evans came to an event that we held in Nelson a couple of weeks ago, and he's talking about, I can't do a Corky, no one can do a Corky except Corky, but he was talking about in the legislature, in the cafeteria, in the basement of the legislature, and he said one team sits on one side, the other team sits on the other side, and everyone's watching to see if someone goes and talks to the bad guys. His words, bad guys. That partisanship that we have in the legislature, it goes into the cafeteria and it goes into our communities. And you see it really strongly at election time, but it's there all the time. That whatever one does, the other one hates and tries to get rid of. It's not helpful. Well, maybe we should just go on then, Frog.
Huh?
Maybe we should just keep going. Are you getting it?
No, it's not.
Not working? Okay.
Too bad.
A lot of people are worried that we'll get extremists in our parliament when we get a proportional system, because of course it takes fewer votes, a lower percentage of our votes to actually get into parliament. But the real danger with extremists is right here with our system. These guys, they both lost the election. Trump lost the election. Clinton got more votes. Yes, he won it. Less than half the people wanted him. We're stuck with him. On the right-hand side, Doug Ford got in with 40% of the vote. 60% of the Ontarians wanted somebody else, but are stuck with Ford. And these are extreme guys. They're scary. So we end up with a demoralized electorate. Fewer and fewer of us are voting, in fact, and it's young people who are voting the least. People under 45, only 45% vote. More than half of them have stopped caring, stopped having any kind of trust in our democracy.
That was first past the post, briefly. Now we move on to proportional representation. This is the essence of proportional representation, that what we vote determines how many seats the parties get, determines the amount of power the parties get. We often say, if the Purple Party gets 30% of the vote, they get 30% of the seats and 30% of the power, no more, no less. Right now, that's not the case under first past the post. There's about 93, 94 countries around the world that are using them. Some of them you've probably heard of, heard bad things about. It doesn't work well for everyone, partly because some countries are just, their problem is not their electoral system, they have bigger problems than that. It works very well in a lot of countries, and the interesting thing is that no two countries are using exactly the same system. They all tailor-make it for their own particular situation.
Another interesting thing is that
Another interesting aspect here is that in every country that still has first past the post, and there aren't that many left, there are groups like ours advocating to change to proportional representation. Countries that have proportional representation do not have groups that want to go back to first past the post. In fact, not a single country that adopted proportional representation has ever gone back, even though people have been asked in referenda and given the opportunity to turn it back. They don't want to go back. And then they say, well, will those coalition governments get anything done? All they'll be talking is fighting with each other and they won't get anything done. Well, we have a very good example of a minority government in Canada. Two elections, 1963, 1968, Lester Pearson, Liberal government, minority government, which was supported by Tommy Douglas, gave us universal healthcare system that we have now and cherish. The Canada Pension Plan, without which many of us wouldn't be surviving. We got student loans, the 40-hour work week, minimum wage, 2 weeks guaranteed vacation, the maple leaf flag, and the end of the death penalty in Canada. So minority governments, not only can they get things done, they can get things done very efficiently.
Proportional systems also tend to elect more women and more minorities, because of course if you're only putting one candidate up, it tends to be an aging, balding male. If you can put up more candidates, you're going to put up women, you're going to show the diversity that you want people to think you represent, or see you represent. So these women have all been elected president or prime minister of their countries. Some of them have moved on since then, but they were all once at one time. It's interesting to look at Australia, to go back. It's interesting to look at Australia. Australia has a lower house and an upper house, like we do too. But in their lower house, they use a winner-take-all system. In their upper house, they use a proportional system. The lower house, 26% women, upper house, 42% women. Just by changing the electoral system. Same country, same election, same voters, very different outcome. Is that me or you?
So it's sort of a summarizing slide. It's easier for voters because we don't have to vote strategically, we just vote for whoever we like the best. And we get better governance because it's more stable, we don't get those policy lurches. More people will participate in democracy. Almost all the votes count, not all the votes, but almost all the votes count. There's no need for strategic voting. Political parties have to work together. They can't just have one party that dictates whatever will happen. They have to find agreement amongst each other. And we get better decisions and more stable government policies that way.
You guys, by this time, have probably all received the first notice in the mail, that big postcard. Not very exciting, but it was big. So that's the first sign that this is coming. Then between, I think, the October 15th, around the middle of October, you'll get this in the mail, and that has lots of information, not only about how to vote, but about the systems in it. And 20 pages, easy reading. So the ballots will come out between October 22nd and November 2nd, depending on where you are in the province. There's a pro group called Vote PRBC, and there's an anti-group called No PR, something, No Proportional Representation. They each got $500,000 of our tax dollars, and they're allowed to raise another $200,000, so they can spend up to $700,000 on advertising. That's pretty much it. Elections BC is administering the election and doing their very, very best to keep it absolutely nonpartisan. That's their job. They do not go into politics. They just make sure that everything's clear for us. The BC Attorney General, David Eby, who was in charge of this, he has guaranteed that results will be proportional. That means 30% of the vote equals 30% of the seats of the power. No region will have any fewer MLAs. We are not losing any rural representation. All MLAs will be local or regional. No one's getting parachuted in from another region. No significant increase in the number of MLAs. They said there will be between 0 to 9 more, so that's guaranteed. And for the proportional seats, a 5% threshold, so they need to get at least 5% in order to get a seat. And these were all based on feedback from people of BC that was done online. Some of you may have done the online consultation. It happened between November and February, and there were 91,000 BCers who filled it out, so it's significant input. So these are the two questions on the ballot. The first question, pretty straightforward. Which should BC use for the elections? Current first past the post or a proportional voting system? It needs 50% plus 1 to pass. Both of them do. Question 2, if BC adopts a proportional voting system, which system do you prefer? There's 3 on the ballot. There is information in the booklet that will come out, plus there's other websites with information about it, and we can give you a handout with lots of videos. You can spend all night watching videos about systems. These are the 3 systems. All 3 of them keep local candidates and have regional.
So which were the challenges they were looking at? Because from that input that we gave, 93,000 of us, we got some government got some feedback. First of all, we have a very big province and our population is very unevenly dispersed. A lot of people living very close together in the lower mainland, right where we live, and up north even more. A lot of land, not very many people. And then from that feedback, we told the government, we want to keep local representation. We want more of our votes to count. We want proportional election results. We want to vote for real people, not for some party list thing. We want it to be simple to use. We don't want a whole lot more politicians, and neither do we want crazy big ridings. So, on the right-hand side, you see the solutions that they came up with. To have local representation, which is one of the first things that we want, we need to keep the first past the post system. That's what guarantees that geographic representation. The only system that does that. To make results proportional and to make all votes count, we need either bigger ridings or we need more politicians. And so what we're getting is, since we don't want more politicians, is bigger ridings. There's 3 different ways on the ballot, and first one is to double the size of the ridings and then elect 2 MLAs in that riding. One way to get proportional results and make our votes count. 2 is elect a local candidate as well as a regional candidate. So we get 2 votes. That's called mixed member proportional. Or we can try to deal with that geography that we have, that geography issue, by having a different system in cities and in the rural ridings like ours.
So very briefly, we're not going to go into a lot of detail about these because you're just not going to. So dual member takes a very simple system. It takes 2 existing current ridings, puts them together into one, and we elect 2 candidates. First one by first past the post. The second one is based on province-wide proportional results, to make the results proportional. And the very largest ridings in BC would not change. They'd just be first past the post because they would just be too big to put them together.
Then we have the mixed member, where we get 2 votes. We vote for our local candidate, just as we are now, in a larger riding, 40% larger approximately, and we get the second vote goes to elect a regional MLA. So for instance, we could have put 10 rural ridings together, and we turn that into 6 ridings, where we elect our local MLA, larger ridings, and then we get 4 regional MLAs as well.
And the third system is something called rural-urban, and it uses mixed member proportional, what Sheng just said, in the rural areas, so that's what we'd be using. In the urban areas, it uses a system called single transferable vote. We voted on that in 2005 and 2009. The thing with single transferable vote is when you put 6 ridings together in the rural areas, it'd be half the province. So in the cities, it's not such a big deal to do that because they're so densely populated, but it has very proportional results. So it means that the rural ridings don't have to increase quite as much. Only 20% bigger.
So what will the difference be? You may remember these are the results from the riding over here, not Kootenay West. I didn't change that slide. This is your own election. And what happens is we're still going to elect that same local representative, but the other votes will now go to elect either that second MLA in your riding, or it will go to elect a regional MLA. So those votes actually will count, and that's how we get proportional representation. That's how we get all our votes to count. That's how we get the government that we actually vote for.
So most things are going to stay the same. You're still going to get your voter card in the mail. You're going to have a day when you go to the ballot. You'll still get a paper ballot given to you by the people working at the same people working at the voter booth. You're going to take it and mark your ballot, and it will either be a check mark or an X, your choice, for 1 or for 2. It's really not more complicated than that.
So, here comes the begging part. We're, like Anne said, we're totally grassroots. Nobody pays us for our expenses, and we don't want to be paid for it either, because we believe in this. But campaigns still cost money. We need to print stuff. We need to reimburse some people who can't afford to pay for their own expenses. We do advertising. So, that's the right-hand side. We need some money. If you have some time to help us, this is a people-driven organization. We really would appreciate it, and we'll get into details about all the things you can do to help. And we need your heart. We need some passion in there to be able to win it. We have very strong opponents who know they have much to lose from the status quo, lobbyists, vested interest, willing to tell you all kinds of stuff. They also have lots of money. So we need your help. We can't do it just with the 2 of us.
I just want to add, people try to frame this as a political party thing. It's really not about the parties. The reason that it's taken so long for this issue to get heard is because the political parties would much rather have all the power. Thank you very much. They're not that interested in sharing, and they're used to this culture where, you know, one side is the winner and one side's a loser, and they hate each other. And proportional representation is really about voters. It's really about putting us back in the driver's seat, so that if 10% of the population wants to vote Green, that we get 10% Greens in there. And so it really is about us. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I forgot. Okay, here. So we need you. If you think this is a good idea, this really is our best opportunity that we'll have. This is our third referendum in BC since 2005. It's unlikely that voters will have an appetite for it again for the next decade or a couple of decades. So if you feel this is something that's important to you, for your children, for your grandchildren, please get involved. It's only a month, and then it's going to be, and then it's pretty much over. We have a pledge sheet for you to sign. It's Fair Vote Canada mail list over there. Talk to friends and neighbors. Just get into discussions. There's lots of information out there. Get active on social media. It's actually quite fun. There's a writers group, and Sheng is one of the media log people. So every week he goes through all the newspaper articles that are in the paper, sends out an email, and then people can comment on it.
That's right, yeah, I just want to make a plug for that one, because it's really, if you want to know what's happening, what people are talking about, that's the one to subscribe to. It's one email a day, only one. No, every now and then if I make a terrible mistake, I'll have to send a second one to fix it, but usually it's just one email a day, and it's extremely informative. And the nice thing is you just have to click on the link, and you can just like a comment that you've seen, or you can make a few comments yourself. It's not difficult, it's not scary, but it is very effective. And so I really encourage you to subscribe to that, and we have the information right here for you.
Questions?
Thank you. Yeah, questions.
Thank you for that.
If Ellen wants to, I don't know, do you want to come up and answer questions? If you'd like to. Yeah.
I've got partly a question, but also a comment. I went to the meeting that was held in Grand Forks on the same subject, and people really bogged down on those three choices. But one of the things that the speaker there said, and I thought it would be worth, and I'm assuming she was right, is you don't have to go into that second section. If you like the concept, and you say, yeah, that's what I'm for, but you know, I just lost which of those is the one that really appeals to me. You don't have to do that second section, and your vote will still count.
Absolutely true. It's true that you don't have to. If you don't do it, someone else will do it for you. But yeah, absolutely. If you feel like I don't have the time, I'm just not interested. And for me, I have to say honestly, I do have a favorite, but I'd be happy with any of them. So.
Each question will be counted separately. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I wondered about where you had the 43% was liberal and the other three split up, and then you said the second person would come from
That's a good question. It depends a little bit on the system. But it'll be in the dual member system, for instance, it'll be, they'll look at, say, the Purple Party. The Purple Party got 15% of the vote, but they only won in 10 ridings, so they're 5 ridings short. So where would they find those 5 extra MLAs? They go to the MLAs that got the most votes in their riding. So it'll be, that's in dual member, and in the mixed members system, where we have a local candidate and a group of other candidates, it'll just go to that group to help elect that group. I I'm not explaining it well?
There, we have a handout here, and it has for rural, urban, for mixed member, and for dual member. You can watch videos. Sometimes the trouble with speaking these things is it's just, you know, it's not that interesting, basically.
We've done
the
these.
videos bring it to life.
We've done these talks a number of times, and this is normal. That's once we get bogged down in systems, then everybody is confused. So we try to not go there because it doesn't help anybody. And yes, there is good information there.
It's all about the numbers. The no side has suggested that the political parties are going to be jumping in and sending their people to make up that second position. But that's not going to be the case because it's all about the numbers. And so some math person will be looking at that and seeing who's got the votes. So we're going to decide. The voters are going to decide who those second people are going to be. But there's a mathematical formula that they'll be using.
Everyone's elected. No one is
appointed.
Nobody's appointed.
Okay, so suppose we elect 30% to each of three parties, okay? And then you say we have proportional representation, so we should have 30% of the seats for each of those parties. So now, after that, instead of 3 seats, you're saying there's going to be 2 seats at the most. You don't get 3 members of parliament. You only get
No,
2.
yes. Well, again, we're getting into technicalities here, but yeah.
That's what we want to learn, because
Yeah.
we have to know how to vote, so that's a good question.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, your vote's so easy. You just vote for the person that you want to vote for. If you happen to vote for the person that wins in your riding, then you know where your vote went.
But what if it's equal? What if we vote proportionally and we vote equally for 3 different parties?
Well, you'd have to have a runoff because nobody would have won in your local riding.
So there has to be.
There'll always be one winner, right? Because otherwise we'll have to do that election again. It's simple as that. But if that first vote, your vote, if you don't happen to vote for the person that becomes your local representative, then your vote goes to elect that regional representative or towards that second representative in your riding.
Is there going to be more MLAs on these systems, or is it going to be the same?
Are there going to be more MLAs? Well, the government has promised that we currently have 87, and they have promised not to add more than 8. Somewhere between 0 and 8. If we have to get the dual member system, we'll probably add 0. If we get one of the other systems, then they may want to add a few, just so that the ridings don't become too gigantic.
And the fact is, they add them all the time because as population grows, then we have MLAs based on our population. So as population of BC grows, we get more MLAs. We used to have 20, when we were small.
Very good.
Yes, just a question. You implied in your presentation that the younger voters would come out and vote again. How are you going to do that? They've never voted in the first place. They never have, and they have no interest in it.
Yeah, it's true
They're
that
disenfranchised.
people vote their age, but a lot of people did come out for Trudeau because he promised climate change and he promised proportional representation, or he promised electoral reform. And so a lot of young people did come out, and they're angry. They're upset about this. Now they're also very busy. They don't have a lot of time to spend on it. We don't know what's going to happen. But the fact is that proportional systems often have an increase of approximately 7% more, and that number is bigger for younger people.
About 15% more for people under 40. In proportional representation countries, on average, about 15% of them vote more than under PR's first past the post system.
They saw an increase in the number of younger under 35 voters in New Zealand through the 90s up till now, after they changed to PR.
Well, I think if you can tell the fact that what's going to count.
So, my friend's biggest question, I'm sure you hear this a lot, and she'd be on my case if I didn't ask it and she knew I was here, is under Prop Rep, it's the proportion of number of voters, not geographical size. And that little piece of the Lower Mainland there in Vancouver Island has all the voters. How would this system not remove the power from rural municipalities like ours and give it all to the Lower Mainland? That's what her major bugaboo about this is.
But what do we have right now? It's exactly the same thing that we have now. That's where the voters live. They have way more MLAs in that area than we do. That's not going to change.
I want to say something.
But I think what the question,
No, I don't need that. I'm sorry. I just want to say that if you look carefully at your media troll, all the people who are against PR, all the big spokespeople are from Vancouver. If you look at the people like us who are trying to encourage people to think about PR, we're from rural.
Yeah, but she's a rural person, and she's definitely going to vote against this because that answer just wouldn't satisfy her. Right?
Well, we live here because there aren't so many people.
Yeah.
So we don't have the power of the votes.
Yeah, but she's worried that even more power will go under this system.
No, because it's going to be absolutely proportional.
Yes, and we've also been guaranteed by the government that rural areas will not lose representation, the representation we currently have. And even though it seems terribly unfair, we actually currently, and a lot of people don't know that, we are overrepresented right now. These rural areas like this one have usually between 45 and 50,000 voters. The average riding in BC has 56,000. So we're 10 to 20% overrepresented.
Actually,
already.
Grand Forks, in this area, has 35,000.
35,000, so way overrepresented. Our voices are bigger than the voices in the city right now. And that is not going to change. It's not, this proportional representation is not going to change that. It's a fact of life. And the only solution is, to get half the Lower Mainland come live here.
And do you want that?
Who wants that?
Thanks, all of you. Another welcoming group.
I'm from Vancouver. Don't take that too serious.
Nothing personal. But I still think we need more education on this. Like, I know for myself and my husband, we've been trying to read and understand, and I really appreciate you guys doing this evening, but seriously, I need to know why proportional representation is going to help this area more than what we currently have. And I haven't heard that yet. So how do you explain that to us as voters to want to change the entire voting system when I'm not hearing the benefit for our area?
May I speak? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. If you voted Liberal in Andre's Milkweed, your vote counted. If you voted anything else, your vote was thrown in the garbage. So, with proportional representation, all the votes will count, or almost all the votes will count. Isn't that clear? I mean, I would like.
But how does that help? Like, that's what I'm
Because
trying
your
to
vote
get at.
counts. You make the effort to participate.
But you know what? Everyone's vote counts because
No,
in the
no,
end,
it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Let me talk. I know you may not agree, but just let me talk. So I understand the whole reason when my grandfather taught me about voting. He said it's every vote counts. You go and you vote so that you can get in the majority of the people for the person that they believe is right in that area. So if we look at what happened in Alberta, because there's a lot of people still talking about this, how did third place get in, right? And people don't understand it, and I think that's what I'm asking, is we need more education about how that happens. So in my point of view, what I would like to see is if we have 3 people and we vote, and one person gets ahead, then the other vote should be re-voted for the other 2, so that you are re-voting again for everything. Like, why should one vote count more than another to represent the first person and then not represent the rest of the people? So for me,
You're-
that
you're-
voting system would be a better choice than this
Well, if
proportional
that was on the
representation
table,
where Vancouver is
We have to do with,
huge, right, compared to what we are.
I just want to say, yeah, your grandfather or your father had it right, except the majority part. It's we elect people, and over here in this riding, who didn't get the majority? Most people voted for somebody else. Now, that may, to change that, may not directly benefit your area, but I do believe that it's important for a democracy that a majority gets its way, not the minority. And that's what we're dealing with right now, and that's what we're trying to change. We're trying to make every vote count, and we're trying to get it so that we actually get the governments that we voted for. Because a lot of the alienation and the anger that people feel about government and the mistrust is because we don't get those governments. We go to vote, and we don't get the government that we want. No wonder everybody is unhappy.
I think one way to answer that question is that depending on what actual system was chosen, we'd likely have 2 MLAs here, right? And so for this area, those 2 MLAs would likely be a Liberal and an NDP MLA. And one of the big challenges is when we elect an individual, if that individual happens to be from the governing party, they have all sorts of influence at the provincial government level. If they're not, they don't, right? And so having that representation here, and the votes that went to the Greens or the Conservatives would likely be represented somewhere else, right? Like, so that vote would be counted somewhere in the Lower Mainland. But by having those dual members representing us, we would have that representation and that voice at the provincial government level, as well as having both of those people obliged to represent us locally, right? And so that's where the difference is to me in terms of the system right now, where we flip back and forth from having, last election we had somebody that had some ability to invoke a significant amount of change, and now it's a very different situation, right?
Did everybody hear Rolly's answer on that? That's Rolly Russell back there, in case you're wondering who's talking.
Aye.
Guy, are you finished or? The guy was
Yeah.
gonna-
My concern would be how do you get these parties that, using your words, hate each other, to sit around the table and work together?
It was really,
I really like to answer that one, because I came here from Holland, where they have a proportional system. And first few years I didn't pay much attention to politics, establish yourself. And one day I just happened to look at the TV and watched a debate. And I couldn't believe it. These guys weren't listening to each other, having a conversation. They were yelling at each other, finger pointing, name calling. And where I came from, that just doesn't happen. The politicians don't do that stuff because they know next week they may need you to help with your issue. So they're not going to be putting you down and putting on that atrocious show that we get in our parliaments. People do become, because they have to work together to achieve anything. They have to work together. They do it. Politicians will actually do it. That's the bottom line.
You have to have a bit of education going through it, how to cooperate.
But it goes pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but many of the countries that you showed that actually have representation in voting did not have a referendum. They tried it with a clause in the fact that if in a certain amount of time they didn't want it, they had the opportunity to review the system. And as you said, nobody has done that. Where this, to me anyway, was so frustrating because I am in favor of this, and I am in favor of electoral change, is the fact that we keep having referendums. And when people don't understand the system, they would prefer to say no, because change is frightening. I wish we'd stop having a referendum, and some government would just have the guts to say, this is what we're going to try. And once we tried it, we'd see that, your head doesn't fall off, the country doesn't sink into the ground, the sky doesn't fall, that actually it works. But we keep having a referendum, and change is frightening for most people. But I mean, that's just a statement, that's not how it's working. So all I can do is bless you and hope that it works this time.
We did, good, really good point. Did forget to say that, but one of the guarantees is that there will be, and this is in law, there will be a follow-up referendum after 2 election cycles to say, what do you think? Is this working? Do we need to change something? And we don't know what the question is right now, but they have guaranteed that along with all those other guarantees. So yes, we do get to take it for a test drive and say, hey, actually it's not bad, or, you know, so that's the buyer remorse clause, and it is legal.
So, sorry, I'm a bit thick here, I think I'm not getting it. The 40, let's say the person in this riding has voted, they get 40% of the popular vote, and so there's 70% of the vote is left. Exactly how does that apply to, where do those votes go to actually count?
I'm not sure if I got it.
The question is, if 40% vote for one candidate, that candidate wins, that means those 60% of the votes have to go somewhere else. Where do they go? Well, it depends on the system. It either goes towards electing a second candidate in your riding, that's dual member, or it goes to electing a group of regional representatives, and that's in the MMP system.
They're counted, they just don't drop off the map.
They don't drop off, no, they count towards electing a representative.
That's what I don't think people are understanding.
Somewhere in the province.
It could be, yeah, it could be that.
Could be in your area, or it could be somewhere in the province.
Could be somewhere else.
Yeah.
How does that get determined?
Just by count, just the count. So if in this riding you had a pretty good NDP, or an independent actually, or independents under dual member, if they become second, they automatically get elected. That's part of those rules they put in there, because otherwise it'd be so hard for independents to get elected. Lost my train of thought. So in this case, yeah, if you have a very strong NDP candidate here, and province-wide not enough NDPers were elected, then they look at the whole province, and the top people who got the most votes in their riding, those will be the ones that get those regional seats or those second seats. So it's all based on how we vote.
So a riding in northern Vancouver Island where the Green Party got 15% of the local vote, they could still win over somebody who got 25% of the local vote in that area, because they steal the votes, the Green votes from elsewhere in the province?
For the second seat.
It's theoretically possible. It's most likely is that your second, in the dual member, that your second elected candidate will be who came in second. But not always. It is possible that in some ridings, it would be the person that came in third.
So can I just, one more question?
But you still get your first, the one who won, just like now. We're still going to do that. Don't forget that. That first candidate is going to be your candidate, your local candidate. That second, the proportional, depends on the system.
There's lots of, you can take one of these and check out some videos, and it explains it. Words are really hard to explain these things. You have to sort of see how it works out.
I've been saying it's like trying to explain how to change your bicycle tire, to make strawberry jam, and to
fix the dishwasher.
Do up your shoes, right?
So what that makes it, by going into these details, it makes it sound so complicated that people then get scared that when they go to vote in the ballot box, they won't understand how to put their ticks.
Yes.
But it's very simple. You will still have, it's just that the majority now, the 40% or the 45%, they get everything. Now the 45% will get one, but the other side also now counts, and we get representation from the other side. 60% that up to this point gets tossed away. And how that looks in the ballot box is still your basic, take your X, and it's not that complicated.
Yes.
I think just two more questions,
Yeah,
because it's 5
we
to
have, again, we have sheets here, we have links here to websites where that kind of question about the details, the mechanicals of these systems, which are not that difficult, they're really not that difficult to get to. You take half an hour of your time and you'll get all 3 systems in and out. It's very hard to explain in words, but it's not difficult. And we really encourage you, people like you who are interested, to have a look at it and find out how easy it is. You have one more
I'd like
question.
to follow up a little bit on what Rolly said. Is it Rolly? I want to know how this is going to feel. The difference between the mixed, and I know that this is where the education of everyone is falling flat, or we're just not getting those 2 choices. But let's say the dual and the mixed, okay? So what you were saying is if we go with the mixed, you don't feel the effect of that minority in your local area. Is that right? You don't feel if your votes, the majority person you elect. The people, the second person, if you elect that second person, it's the dual system, then you feel the effect of that person working in your area. But if you go with the mix, then the votes go somewhere else. You don't necessarily...
You're part of a region, so that second vote is still in the region. So we're in the Kootenai region, you're going to have a local person for this area, and the riding will be a little bit bigger to make room for that regional second candidate. So it's not going to be someone from, Queen Charlotte Islands, it's going to be someone from the Kootenays.
So both ways you'd have a second provincial representative. It just depends whether they would be more local or more.
And certainly the dual member, you would probably know both the candidates. The bigger parties would have 2 names, and you have 1 X. The MMP, the multiple, is probably more due diligence would be required, because if they decide to use the open list, there's a lot more names on your list under each of the parties. That's for your regional vote.
So anyone, 2 more burning questions, 1 more?
Perhaps another way to look at this is this province came out of the Depression through social credit and Wack Bennett. And people don't understand that social credit was not a right-wing party, it was a socialist party. They decided that the wealth of the province had to be shared. They invented BC Hydro, BC Railroad, and a bunch of other BC-owned corporations, and were very successful. And unfortunately, because it was a political party, when Wack Bennett's son, Bill Bennett, took over, the whole thing fell apart. You might remember brick shares. And what the brick shares were was one of the biggest con jobs ever pulled on voters. They took all the losing provincial organizations, put them in a pile, and gave you a free brick share, and you could buy more if you wanted. Does anybody still have the brick shares? Not half and half. Me too. Right. They're worthless. What proportional representation does is not allow one political party with good ideas to change leadership and become a not good party. That's all it does. It's a protection. It's an insurance policy. People have to get along with one another, which isn't happening now at all.
Okay, one last question then.
One more question? Yeah, sure.
I hate to be a downer, but it's not really a question. Well, actually, this is a question. This idea that you have 3 choices on one side and 1 choice on the other side, who thought of that? The reason I ask that is because my friend who is scared of this and is definitely going to vote for first past the post, I've said to her, you don't have to worry, because this requires voters, common people, to actually sit down and work at it to make a choice among multiple choices on one side, or what they already know and think they understand on the other side. And I suspect most people are just going to go with what they know. So whose idea was it to have 3 choices?
It came from the Attorney General, this process, after...
Party in power?
After the input of 90, a record number of people...
95,000
People provided input. There's countries have done this all kinds of different ways. Like Ellen said, a lot of countries have just legislated it. Or somebody here suggests, why don't we just legislate it? No voice for us at all. This, we have two questions.
Yeah.
First question is that question, that fair question. You want to keep what we have, or do you want to change to something else? Right, that's our two sides, right? You can have one or the other. Next question now is, they give us the privilege to say, of these three systems, which one do you like the best?
Forgive my cynicism, I just think that you guys are gonna lose it, that's all. I'll probably vote for
Would
it,
it
but-
feel fair if they said, first past the post, do you want first past the post, or first past the post, or first past the post? Then you have three on each side. It's, whatever, you know what, sometimes whatever governments do, we're gonna hate. And we have to try to get beyond that and think, is this something that's gonna be good for me, my family, my community, my province, or is it gonna be bad?
You're requiring people to think too much, I'm just too cynical about the voters, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. So, this is a lot of information for people to try and, I think, process. But I think this really helped for me, and I hope that it helped somewhat for some of you.